All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining our Lunch and Learn today. We have two guests today, uh, and we're going to talk about how close you really are to oil and gas waste. First, we have Leanne Hill. She is the Director of Energy and Health at PSE Healthy Energy, where she focuses on the impacts of energy production and use on human health, the environment, and climate. Hill joined PSE in 2016 to support the organization's environmental health work on oil and gas. And so recently her work focuses on public health dimensions of oil and gas development, carbon management, approaches to wildfire prevention and mitigation in California. And she has characterized oil and gas associated chemicals using usage and waste streams across multiple states and examine the human health hazards and risks associated with underground gas storage, oil and gas development, and produced water reuse. So thank you, Leanne, for joining us today. We also have Veronica Coptis. She joined the CCJ, Center for Coalfield Justice staff in March 2013 as a community organizer and now serves as their executive director. She grew up in western Greene County near the largest underground coal mine in the country. She currently lives in Carmichael, PA, surrounded by shale gas extraction. She's organized and invested in local residents to shift the Center for Coalfield Justice from a 3 staff to over a dozen people who are rooted in the communities that serve CCJ. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here today. I'm really excited to share this tool. Veronica, and I know that you all had reached out to folks around southwestern PA to talk about the tool a while ago and have Leanne present on it. And when she did, I was really excited to offer you as guests today, and that you accepted to be able to talk about this tool with a larger audience, because I feel like it's a really important thing for the work that we do, as well as just residents in the community. So Leanne, we're going to start with you, and I think you have a couple slides we're going to go over, and then we're going to have a live demonstration of the tool, and we're going to go over some things that people need to know when they use it, and then we're going to talk to Veronica next. So go ahead to the next slide. Thank you, Emma. We have her on the back end working on our tech. So if you have questions for Leanne or Veronica as we move on in the presentation, don't hesitate to put them in the chat, or we can actually view those live and see those comments live. So go ahead and put any questions you have, and I'll give it over to you, Leanne.
Thank you so much, Jillian. Really, thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to be able to join today to share this new interactive data visualization tool. Really, really happy to be here. I just wanted to give a little bit more background on the organization that I work for. So for the last 6 years, I've been with Physicians, Scientists, and Engineers for Healthy Energy, or PSE for short. We are a nonprofit energy and science policy research institute headquartered in Oakland, California, but we have staff all across the country, and we work in nearly every oil and gas state. And our mission is to generate science-based energy and climate solutions that protect public health and the environment. And what that ends up looking like is our scientific outputs take different forms, including peer-reviewed journal publications, technical reports, briefings, and interactive data visualization tools, which I'm really excited to be able to share with you today. And if you're interested in our work on a broad range of topics, including oil and gas related topics, clean energy transition, etc., feel free to visit our website at psehealthyenergy.org, or you can also check us out on Twitter. And Emma, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide. So the interactive data visualization tools I want to walk through today really aim to answer broader questions at hand. Questions like, where is oil and gas waste produced in Pennsylvania, and where does it end up? And folks may be really interested in this topic, given that oil and gas waste contains contaminants that are hazardous to human health. These contaminants include radioactive materials such as radium-226 and uranium. And I just want to say upfront that while the information presented here today cannot be directly used to evaluate exposures or health risks explicitly or at a more refined scale, it is helpful to be aware of where oil and gas waste is generated within the state and where it ends up. And so, as compared to many other oil and gas states in Pennsylvania and through the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, they maintain a publicly accessible data portal that houses operator reported oil and gas waste data. And previously, I evaluated the data that's available in this inventory and published a paper back in 2019 alongside co authors focused on different types of oil and gas waste, where waste was generated in the state, and where it was disposed of. However, the data at the time that was available only went through 2017. And on the slide here, you can see there's a couple key takeaways from that study. Again, we looked at this publicly available inventory. We examined data from 1991 through 2017. And what we ended up finding out was that the majority of Pennsylvania oil and gas wastewater that was generated in the state ended up being reused to facilitate more oil and gas production. We found that the final endpoints that were listed in the inventory don't always reflect the final endpoint of where the waste ends up. Sometimes it's intermediary points. And we also found that solid waste tended to be easier to track as compared to liquid waste. So solid waste like drill cuttings that are produced when drilling a well, that are typically end up in landfills, were easier for us to track as compared to liquid waste forms that end up being reused, managed, and disposed of in a variety of different ways and have different endpoints. And so really what we're doing with this interactive tool is building off of this previous work to update information and make it publicly accessible. So Emma, if you could advance to the next slide. Great. So these interactive data visualization tools were created with feedback and direct input from the Center for Coalfield Justice and with support from the Climate and Clean Energy Equity Fund. These tools essentially allow you to view how much oil and gas waste is generated by county, by Pennsylvania State House District, and by State Senate District. And we're looking at more recent years, so 2015 through 2021. And using this tool, you can also see how much solid waste, or in other words, drill cuttings, are disposed of in landfills. You can look at this again by county, by House, and Senate District throughout the state. And so this is just a screenshot of what the visualization tool looks like. But what I would love to do is be able to actually walk you through the website today. And the link is also shown on this slide here if you want to use this as we walk through, if you want to play around with it on your own. The link is www.psehealthyenergy.org/PA_OG waste tool. And so if we could switch over to the view of the website, that would be great. Okay, excellent. So this is the view of where all the interactive data visualization tools live on our website. At the top, we have a brief description, and the orange links that you see here show the different ways that data is shown on our website. You can go ahead, and if you're interested in, say, looking at trends of waste generation over time, if you're interested in looking at information by county, by House District, by Senate District, you can go ahead and click on any of these links at the top, and it'll take you directly to the visualization tool that you might be most interested in. And in addition to that, we have this section called Quick Tips. So in order to design these data visualization tools, we rely on a software program called Tableau. Some may be more familiar than others with using this type of platform. And so this provides you kind of an overview of what some of the icons in the data visualization tools mean to help guide you along the way. And in addition to that, we have our glossary and sources here. So there may be certain terms that are featured on the website that might require additional explanation. You may want to directly go to the link where the data was sourced from. So you can go ahead and click on this glossary and sources page and be able to get some additional information. And so walking through, starting with the first tool and how we were able to organize the data here, we looked at annual trends in waste generation over time. And so what you can see from this tool here is between 2015 and 2021, oil and gas development in Pennsylvania ended up generating more than 314 million barrels of produced fluids and over 4.7 million tons of drill cuttings over this time frame. And if you go ahead and hover over each of these bars, you can actually see the data points and be able to pull out individual pieces of information. So for here in 2021 alone, nearly 70 million barrels of produced fluids. And over here, if you look at drill cuttings, more than 804,000 tons of drill cuttings were generated from oil and gas development in Pennsylvania statewide in the year 2021. And just to briefly define these waste terms, produced fluids, sorry, the page had to reload. Produced fluids are the most common type of liquid waste that are produced during oil and gas development. They're typically co-produced with oil when oil and gas is being produced. And so the trends that you see here for produced fluid are more typical and maybe generalized as trends in oil and gas production over time. Whereas looking at drill cuttings, again, this is the most common form of solid waste that is generated. These drill cuttings are essentially pulled up from the subsurface when a well is being drilled. And so the trends you're going to see over time in drill cuttings are generally more representative in drilling new wells over time. And so this looks at annual trends. And if we scroll down a bit further, we move to looking at trends by county. And this is where we start getting into more of the spatial story that we're talking about here. And so what you can see from this map, the darker colors are going to indicate counties that have greater oil and gas waste generated within that county over the time frame that we're looking at. Again, this is 2015 to 2021. And so immediately what jumps out on the left-hand side with produced fluids, you see, heightened produced fluid generation in Southwest Pennsylvania. You can go ahead and take a look in Washington and Greene counties. If I hover over here, you can see the number of waste generating wells. And then over this time frame, just for example, over 70 million barrels of produced fluids being generated over this time frame. For Washington County, you have nearly 49 million barrels of produced fluids being generated over this time frame. And then on the right-hand side, you can see you can end up seeing drill cuttings being generated, and you see the darker colors also noted in Southwest Pennsylvania, but also in the Northeast. Here we have Susquehanna County with nearly 1 million tons of drill cuttings being generated. And again, these trends generally reflect, produced fluids reflect oil and gas production over time, whereas the drill cuttings tend to reflect where new wells have been drilled over time for this period that we're looking at. Okay, and if I scroll down a little bit more, this visualization here is trying to answer the question, where is waste generated within the state of Pennsylvania? And then scrolling down here, we're aiming to answer, where does waste actually end up within the state of Pennsylvania? And what we've done here is kind of narrowed in to just focus on drill cuttings for the time being. And I can get into that in a minute. And so what you can end up seeing in this visualization, only counties that have landfills accepting drill cuttings are shown in this visualization, which is why it looks a little bit patchy. But immediately what stands out, there's a rank order on the right-hand side here, and you see that there are landfills in these counties, Lackawanna, Tioga, that are accepting a significant proportion of oil and gas waste. Washington County as well, so accepting these drill cuttings. And I believe that, in the Northeast, this is going to be things like Keystone and Alliance and Phoenix Resources landfills. And in the Southwest, it's going to be more Arden and Westmoreland landfills accepting oil and gas waste. And I mentioned before that here we're focusing just on drill cuttings. And that is largely because we just have a lot better data and a lot more granularity in being able to track solid waste or drill cuttings between where they're generated and where they end up in the state. We saw the same trend when I looked previously for the previous paper that I published, that basically about only 45% of the waste entries for liquid waste, I was able to track to the next location. Whereas for drill cuttings, I was able to track 99% of the waste entries for solid waste to their next location. And more often than not, that is to landfills within the state of Pennsylvania. And so rather than showing incomplete data, we decided to show the most complete data that we have, which is focused on, again, solid waste and landfills. And I would be happy to answer other questions. I think, Jillian, you may have written something in the chat I might have missed.
Yeah, so I just had a couple quick questions. So we're looking at data from 2015 to 2021. And so are there plans in the future, and maybe this is a question we can ask at the end, but are there plans in the future for the updated data from 2022? And this looks like it's just Pennsylvania. Do we know how much of the waste that is generated in Pennsylvania is going to other states? Is anybody looking at that?
These are great questions. Starting with the first question, I think that the data becomes available, a bit after. So, for example, I likely wouldn't have access to the next year's of data until a couple months into 2023. So there is a bit of a lag, but but Veronica and I have talked about going ahead and trying to update this data set over time with the publicly available data that's provided through PADEP. So that's the first bit. And in addition to that, I'll get into maps that we show House and Senate districts, and being able to update that information as well after the midterms was something we had discussed as well. And then your comments about waste staying in state or waste traveling out of state is a really great question. For the purposes of focusing on drill cuttings and solid waste, the vast majority of drill cuttings are going to stay within the state of Pennsylvania. However, we do know that waste is sent out of state. Certain hazardous waste designations, things like filter socks, waste that has a more significant radioactive component, may require to be sent to specialized facilities. And so for the paper that I published back in 2019, again, that looked at data that was a bit older, we were able to track waste that traveled to Utah and other states, travel great distances. And then certainly when it comes to liquid waste, there is a good amount of liquid that gets injected through class 2 UIC wells that goes over into Ohio. So we were able to observe that as well. But for the purposes of what we're looking at today, we're focused on the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, thank you for answering my questions. I think that was really helpful. And I think it's really interesting to be able to track the waste. So I really appreciate you guys working on this project. And I think, do you have another screen, or you have one more, or is this your last one?
Oh, yeah. So let me just really briefly, before I turn things over to Veronica, show the other ways that we've organized the data. And these maps are going to look fairly similar in terms of the spatial trends that we've noticed. So the darker blue or the darker orange colors being shown in similar portions of the state. But rather than just being able to provide the information by county, we also wanted to be able to provide the information by state House and state Senate districts. And so that's essentially what you're seeing here, and any user can go ahead, and if folks happen to know what House or Senate district they are in and want me to highlight that information, you're more than welcome to drop that information into the chat. But essentially, we're showing similar information here. If we look at House District 50 and we look at produced fluid generation, we see House District 50 has produced 73 million barrels of produced fluids over the time frame we're looking at, more than any other House district in the state of Pennsylvania. And you can go ahead and see representative information also when you go ahead and hover over. And similarly, when you go ahead and look at drill cuttings, if we want to highlight some other districts, we have District 110 here, 858,000 tons of drill cuttings generated. House District 111, 686,000 tons of drill cuttings. And you have the district information, the representative and party all tied to this visualization. And just scrolling down to, again, look at drill cuttings and where they end up. We have the same information provided here by House District, so you can clearly see if we're looking at House District 68, 883,000 tons of drill cuttings sent to this district, sent to landfills within this district. And you can see these districts listed in rank order by the amount of drill cuttings that are sent to landfills within each district. And we essentially have the same information by Senate for folks that may be interested in that as well. Again, these visualizations look very similar. The Senate districts are much larger, and so you don't see as much spatial granularity as you do with the House districts here, but again, showing very similar trends. And we have all of this information included on one page, which can get a little bit cumbersome. But after each set of visualizations, we have these indicators here, these links that you can click on that say top, that end up bringing you all the way to the top of the page. So you can go ahead and reorient and then end up clicking on whatever visualization you'd like to see next.
That's really awesome. Yeah, and so I'm seeing some of our local districts, some of the representatives there, and I mean, I knew that this was happening, but I think Veronica, are you going to talk more about how people can organize and use this tool for their purposes?
Yeah, I am. And there's a question in the comments that came in, so I wonder if Leanne, I think it'd be helpful maybe for you to answer that, Leanne, about what is actual drill cuttings, and like what constituents that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I just wasn't on the right tab there to be able to see this question. So the question is, when you talk about drill cuttings, are you talking about oil and gas waste plus other things? And if so, what are the other things that are included? So for drill cuttings here, we're primarily talking about when an operator is going to drill into the subsurface, when they insert the drill, they end up pulling out everything that previously would be where the borehole is. And so basically it's anything within the subsurface that's going to be dirt. And as you get deeper and deeper down into the subsurface, what you end up encountering are things called naturally occurring radioactive materials. These things naturally occur in the subsurface. They are components that as they end up degrading, they can, be things that we're more familiar with up at the surface level. So things like radon, and essentially naturally occurring radioactive materials are things that I highlighted at the top of this call, radium-226 and uranium, that are associated with adverse health effects. And so essentially a component of those drill cuttings are in addition to kind of a general description of dirt, rock, and substrate in the subsurface, are also hazardous components as well being brought to the surface.
That's great. I am putting in a link in the chat for if I can. I don't. It's not letting me. That's really weird. I'm trying to put a link in the chat. I wonder if it will let me later. But so there is this resource from the EPA about the technically enhanced radioactive. Naturally occurring radioactive materials they call it TNORM for short. And that was a really great question. I think it's, learning this subject for the first time and all the things that are included in oil and gas development can be really daunting. So I appreciate the questions. And yeah, thanks, Veronica, for flagging that because I did not see that. All right. So we're going to go to the next scene and
Oh, I lost your audio, Jillian.
Yeah, lost it on my end as well.
oh, I apologize. Can
Here
you
we
hear me
go.
now? Okay. All right. I apologize. So thank you for the question in the chat. I think it was a great question. And so now we have Veronica. We're going to talk a little bit more about the tool, and we have the link up here for you. And so Veronica, why did you think it was important for the work to be done on this tool? And can you tell me a little bit about your part in this work?
Yeah, so we actually at the Center for Coalfield Justice, and we're a similar organization to Protect PT. If you're a Protect PT member and engage with them, and we do organizing and base building in Washington and Greene counties, so we're just your neighbors across the river over here. And the whole purpose of putting this tool together was to help create the visualizations of like where is waste produced, where is it being disposed of, and with a lens of, we've been talking to legislators about the issue of oil and gas waste and how it's being managed in our communities and the potential public health impacts it's having. And we get a lot of response from legislators sometimes being like, well, that's not happening in my district, or I don't know what you're talking about. And so we're like, okay, great. We'll create a map for you and give you an image and be like, look, you have the most waste, the most drill cuttings being disposed of in your district across the state. So it is clearly impacting you. Another purpose behind it too is, if you live next to fracking, which, many of our members do, and I do myself, you're very aware, right, of what the impacts are, what's happening on the sites, where the trucks going and moving in your community. But if you don't live next to fracking, I think there's this comfort level that's designed of like, oh, well, it's not impacting me, so I don't need to be concerned about it. And you can see that when you look at some of the maps Leanne showed, where there's a lot of waste being produced in some counties, and particularly in northeastern PA, right? There's a lot of waste being produced in some counties, but then it's being disposed of in counties in which there's actually no drill cuttings being produced too, right? So the waste is actually moving across our state in ways that could impact communities that are not actually living with the extraction next door to them too. And so we just wanted to help convey the imagery that this is impacting many Pennsylvanians, and it's an issue we should all really care about. And we are also working with a coalition of folks in improving our regulations around how oil and gas waste is being managed. I think a big lesson when we were working with PSE to put this together is actually the lack of data around liquid waste and where is and how to track it. And so from a community perspective, right, as a mom who lives in a community with a lot of waste, if my kids get sick or we want to hold accountability, or how does the regulatory agency, right, even know if compliance is being made, just raises a lot of questions about how are we keeping our health the priority in these communities. And so we just hope people are going to be able to use this tool to look at their county, to look at their legislative district. If you do live in a district where your legislator has a lot of waste either being produced or disposed of, reach out to us, right? We have other toolkits for how to talk to your legislator about these, how to ask them questions. And then, like, on the other side of it is, to no coincidence, many of these legislative districts that have either high waste production or high drill cutting disposal are getting the larger amounts of money and campaign contributions from the energy sector too. So District 50, which was all the way down in the southwestern corner, was one of the counties and one of the districts that was producing the most oil and gas waste. And that legislator has received over $60,000 in her campaign contributions from the fossil fuel industry. So it's also just to help regular day residents paint this picture, right? You have all this waste in your district. Why aren't you doing anything about it? Well, they say they don't know why they're not doing anything about it. And then we can also help you figure out how much money they've taken from the fossil fuel industry. It can be like, oh, well, this looks really suspicious, right? That you've taken a bunch of money from this industry on environmental regulations and improvements in Harrisburg and are not actually championing, right? Like taking on champion roles to protect your residents from potential pollution as well too. And so it's, the goal of it is to help with organizing. And we're here to work, especially if you're in southwestern PA, to work with you around this. If you're in northeastern PA and you still want to work on it, or anywhere else, you can feel free to reach out to us and we'll likely connect you to the frontline organizations like ours that are working in your communities.
Yeah, there are a lot of people, especially around landfills, because now, like in Westmoreland County, I think it's a good example. The Westmoreland Sanitary Landfill, because they've been accepting drill cuttings for the last 10 years, we see that they have now this toxic leachate that they now have to truck the toxic leachate, which we have some previous lunch and learns about that. You can look back at our YouTube channel and look for those other YouTube links. But this leachate from landfills that have accepted the oil and gas drill cuttings, the leachate is very similar to produced water because, you know, what happens when you mix the water down in the hole and you know, some of that water comes back out and they, you know, they reuse the water as Leanne was talking about. But then that waste and the leachate, when it rains and that water gets through the landfill, they're finding with studies that they're very similar in content because they're basically touching the same materials, you know. So I think this is really an important tool for us to use. I want to find out if there's anyone else that has any questions. We went ahead and stuck the link to the link to CCJ's website in the chat. We also had the link before for PSE Healthy Energy's website and the waste tool. So those will all be kept in the chat. And so if folks are watching this later, you can go ahead and open up your chat and get all of the links for all the things that we talked about today. And then, so let me see. I wanted to ask too, Veronica, did you want to talk at all about, you guys have an event coming up tonight, or you know, did you want to talk all about your webinar? Because I know I'm going to be on the webinar tonight. You guys have really great events. Do you want to talk at all about that?
Yeah, and I should probably try to find the registration link or something to talk about it. But yeah, so we do a lot of work around oil and gas issues and how it could be impacting your health, but we don't just tell you, right, that you might be having impacts from pollution, but how do you reduce your exposure, right? What are steps you can still take in the meantime while our government, right, is grossly failing our communities at protecting them? Because the one thing in the communities we work in are lower income or don't have as easy access to move. And I think it can be a failure to just tell people they're being exposed to pollution and not actually give them mitigation tips and tricks too, because like myself, I can't move. I don't have like enough money to pay off my mortgage and find another house. And many people are in that situation. They can't just pick up and leave, nor even if you are financially able, do I think you should have to pick up and leave a place that is your home because of actions of an outside corporation. And so this webinar tonight is really going to talk about what you can do to take best practices to reduce exposure if you are living next to fracking, and then also what can you do to advocate to help us get better protections down the line in Pennsylvania at the state level, at the local level, and maybe one day at the federal level as well too, so that we aren't having to take on mitigation efforts ourselves as individuals, but we are actually changing the rules so that we have a state government or regulatory agencies that are putting people's health over private profits too. And so that starts at 6 o'clock tonight. If you give me 1 second, I can quickly get the registration link.
Yeah, and we put CCJ's website in the chat, but I think actually,
On there.
oh yes, I think I found it. But please join tonight. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen. So there's the link. Again, it'll be in the chat for folks. And yeah, I think I agree. I think it's one thing to tell people that like, oh, by the way, this stuff is happening in your backyard, but then let's give people the tools to do something about it. And I think that with both of our organizations, you know, that's one of the kind of educational components that we add to the conversation. And I think this tool is so great. I know just from PSE's past work, like one of the things that I love about your website is the Roger, it's the database with all of the different studies in it. Anytime I need to know anything, you know, on a topic around oil and gas production, I go to Roger and I look up, you know, and so I love that database. I think you guys have super great tools. And so, yep, there's the registration link. So I want to thank you both for being here today and for working on such an important project, to be able to, for other folks to use this project this tool in a way that can be impactful to them. I would say if people are interested in learning more about how to speak to their legislators, how to contact their legislators, if you're in Westmoreland County or Allegheny County, you can reach out to us and we can give you some information on that. We may have some future events on those topics as well. And if you are in Washington or Greene County or any other county and want to reach out to Veronica, I know that they have some great information on that as well. And definitely join us tonight to keep the conversation going on how to create a healthy home and community where fracking is your neighbor. And I want to go, I want to go ahead to the last screen, Emma, if you wouldn't mind, just the last one. So next month is, we're getting close to the end of the year, and every year in November, we switch our Lunch and Learn up just a little bit. And instead of learning about what other wonderful organizations are doing and having really wonderful guests, the guests are actually going to be our staff here at Protect PT. And so our staff is going to be telling you what we've been working on the last few months and how you can participate and how you can help us grow our organization by giving through Giving Tuesday in the end of the year. So please join us on our next Lunch and Learn on November 29th, and same time, 12 noon during lunch. And if you can please take our survey, we can find out what other topics you'd like us to talk about in our Lunch and Learn. And we're thinking about reformatting the Lunch and Learn, so any survey it would be great to tell us what you like and what you don't like about the Lunch and Learn. And you can find us on social media. I want to thank Leanne Hill and Veronica Coptis for coming on today and talking about the tool, showing us this wonderful tool. And I hope everyone has an opportunity to use this and contact these wonderful, these wonderful organizations if you have questions about this in the future. And thanks everyone for being on today. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.